In paper? Sure.
Okay. Então, muito boa tarde a todos, novamente, já cá estamos. Good afternoon to you all. I think it has been a very fruitful morning. We have covered lots of topics, and I thank again Mrs. Blandine Ferrier and Mrs. César Velarde for their clear and very straightforward presentations, as well as, of course, for their availability to answer all our questions. So we've flown, just to remind us of what we did this morning, we've flown over ICAO, LTAG, CORSIA, and the state action plans. And concerning these topics, I would just like to highlight maybe three aspects which for me are the most important. And the time one is, of course, that time flies as it flew this morning, and that we have to strongly commit and engage to take and to catch this plane. The second one is that there's no other way but to do it together. We really have to cooperate, both between the regulator, ANAC, and the stakeholders at a national level, and all the other entities that are interested in or with responsibilities in both aviation and environment. And of course, at the international level, like we have these two examples here, ICAO, ECAC, and of course we also have a number of other European entities directly related and working on these topics. And the third topic is that if we really follow these topics and these issues closely and in an in-depth way, we will find that they are not only costs, or they are not costs at all, they will be opportunities. And we have been talking about that basically in the questions and in the sharing of experiences, and I'm sure this is going to be the case. So it's now time to revisit CORSIA, but on another light, on the light of EU ETS, and to learn a little bit about the verifiers and accredited bodies, and the basket of measures and SAF, especially. And in the end, I think we're going to visit some ICAO tools, we're going to see the website, and we'll look at the timeline and actions for 2022. We're going to make a small change in the program. The second presentation, which concerns directly to ICAO, as we revised this topic in a very extensive way this morning, we're going to exchange it for the verification and the verifying bodies presentation, which was on the other part of the afternoon. But for the rest, it's going to be the same order. And so I think we're going to keep up the pace. So thank you all. Muito obrigada a todos e obrigada por participarem, porque isso enriquece muito aqui a nossa sessão. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. As mentioned just now, we are going to change it a bit, and what we wanted to show you is this ICAO public web page. So I'm sharing my screen now. I believe some people should see it. Maybe on
Yes.
Not yet. You're supposed to see the ICAO website. It's happening for the people online, I believe. It's going. I believe, but I don't know. Well, you will tell me. And the idea is to show you where to get information on the LTAG, where to get the information exactly on the CORSIA. So this is the homepage of ICAO, and you will recall the 5 strategic objectives that I mentioned this morning in my presentation. So if you click on environment, you will have access to all the information related to environment, aviation environment, and you will see on the left-hand side all the subjects that are addressed by ICAO. So you have information on scientific understanding, on the trends, on technology and standard, noise, local air quality, climate change, some specific information on selection plan, capacity building, airport, Cape, and I want to show you that as well before I go to CORSIA. And here you will see some direct access to some of the ICAO activities. So first, Cape, because we have been talking about Cape this morning, and to show you the structure of Cape. This is the current structure. So you have the term of reference, you have the milestone, you have the members, the observers, and then you have, sorry, I have something here. And then you have the structure of Cape. So this is the current structure of Cape leading to Cape 13. So so you can see the different subjects that are, I believe you can see, right? So that are addressed by CAPE expert. You see the different working groups. So as I mentioned, working group 1, 2, 3, and 4 are working group that you have all the time. Same thing for the fuel task force. You have one specific task group for the LTAG. You have also the modeling and database. You have the forecast and economic group. You have the working group working on the IQ carbon calculator, the impact and science group with experts and scientists nominated by state. So you have all these groups composed with experts, and these experts are nominated by the state and organization that are listed here as CAPE member and observer. Okay? So this is what I want you to show you regarding all the activities undertaken by CAPE. As I mentioned this morning, all the standards that we do on environment, that we develop on environment, they are developed with the support of CAPE. So I think it's important to highlight. So going back to CORSIA, so when you're on the main page of the IQ environment, you can go directly to this shortcut to CORSIA webpage. And this is where you will get the same information we showed you this morning on the two sides of CORSIA, the CORSIA implementation and the CORSIA. So the CORSIA implementation, on that side, you will find all the information such as the SARPs, the assembly resolution, the tools that we have developed to support the state and the operator, that's the CERT, information on the CORSIA eligible fuel, information on the CORSIA eligible emissions unit, the CORSIA central registry. This is where you can get information on the kind of verifier that are available to ask when you are an airline, you need to verify your data. So this is where you get the list of verification bodies that are accredited by state. So clicking here, you get access to this IQ document, and you can select a verification body who is going to, which is going to review your data before you submit this to your authority. So that's what the kind of information you can get. You have also the information here on the one I wanted to show you was the 2020 CO2 emission data. That's the one that is available here. And you will have in October the 2021 CO2 emission data that we will get from the information that state will submit to ICAO. You have as well access, or you will have access as well, sorry, to the CORSIA annual sector growth factor that's going to be used by the state to develop, to calculate the CO2 the amount of offset that you will need, that the airlines will need to offset for the year 2021. Okay? So this is the kind of information you see on the CORSIA implementation. So as I said, you have information on eligible fuel, and we mentioned that this morning. You have information emissions unit, and you have access here to assembly resolution in the 6 ICAO languages, the SARPs, Annex 16, Volume 4, same thing in the 6 languages, and the Environmental Technical Manual, same thing in the 6 ICAO languages available on the website. On the right-hand side, this is where we provide information to support the implementation of CORSIA. So you have information on the body partnership that we talked at CORSIA. You have as well the frequently asked question. And if there is one element when you want to implement CORSIA, maybe one web page that I would recommend you to visit is this one. You have some list of questions, and with the answers coming from the Annex 16 or from the ETM. So you do get the information with the reference to help you to implement CORSIA. Okay? I think that's what I wanted to highlight for CORSIA. Did I mention something else this morning? Oh yeah, I mentioned as well the fuel, on sustainable aviation fuel, and we will have a presentation later today, but after the presentation, I will show you this webpage on sustainable aviation fuel. And the action plan, yes, of course. And if you go on the action plan, you have the information on what is a state action plan, where this initiative comes from, what is the role of a state action plan, okay? And I'm going to highlight this here. That's, and you can see this at the beginning, it's a long-term strategy on climate change for the international aviation sector involving all interested parties at national level. So you can't see actually because Christina wants to join, but when Christina will have joined, then you, you will see it. It's, I don't know if I can accept her, no I cannot.
Try to accept.
Let's, oh yeah, thank you. So this is information on the state action plan with the basket of measures that we mentioned this morning, the Assembly resolution.
Maybe you can show where to find the state action plans.
It's below. It's below.
Right?
Yeah, you're too fast. Then you see here the number of states that have developed an action plan, and you've seen this map this morning, and you can see the state in green that have submitted an action plan, the one that are in the process of developing it, or we'll see. You have some information as well on frequently asked questions, some fact and figures, an IQ online course on that action plan, if you want to, that is available to all. If you want to get a big picture on the state action plan, maybe that's something that when you have your National Action Plan team meeting, you may want to refer to explain just so everybody has the same picture on what is in the state action plan. And then here, all the action plans that are available online on the ICAO website. So when states submit an action plan to ICAO, the state can select if yes or no they want to have this action plan available to the public. If yes, then you will be able to access to the latest version. We just published the latest version. Previous versions are not shared. Okay. I think that's what I really wanted to highlight on this. This afternoon we'll have information on sustainable aviation fuel, and then later on tools. So I will show you again these 2 pages on the website. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to go through the presentation 4.1, if I'm not mistaken, on the role of a verification body. And then we will have a presentation on the EU ETS done by Eduardo, right? Yeah. Eduardo. Yeah. Any question on the website or where to find information? So it's iq.int, and once you are on iq.int, you select environmental protection here, and you have access to everything that we do on environment. One thing I did not mention now is the LTAG. So we had this LTAG high-level meeting on the long-term aspirational goal that happened last week. And on this website, on this webpage, you can get access to the document, including the summary of discussion that present what has been agreed by the state who participated in the meeting. So if you want to have more information on where we stand and what's going to be the basis for the discussion at the Council and the next Assembly, I invite you to look at this meeting as its website here, and you have SD4, the last one, that provide information on what were agreed at this meeting, what was agreed at this meeting. Okay? And you have access to the report as well on the high-level meeting. On the LTAG report, sorry. Okay? So I stop sharing now, and we will go to presentation 4.1 on the role of verifier and accreditation body. That's me. I start.
Yes, you will start. We were expected initially to go back to talk with about CORSIA, and but this morning we've given an overview of how the system works, but a very important element of CORSIA implementation and the monitoring, reporting and verification procedures is the role of verifiers. So we will jointly again explain which is the role, what is a verifier, which is the role, and also the interaction with how the verifier interacts in the whole compliance cycle.
Thank you. So let's talk about the verification process. So why do we need a verification, and why do we do verification within CORSIA? So you recall that CORSIA has these 2 sides, the MRV side and the offsetting side. And to make sure that CORSIA is robust enough, we need to make sure that the data that we receive from the state are robust data and accurate data. And to do that, we need to make sure that the airlines get their data verified, so the state has the confidence that the data that you provide to the state, these are good data and robust enough for the state to submit to ICAO. Because then everything, all the CORSIA system and the offsetting is based on this data that you're submitting to your state. So when we developed this CORSIA and Annex 16 with CAPE, the idea was to have an independent third-party review, and it was the verification body. And the verification body, they need to be accredited by a national accreditation body in order to be eligible to verify the CO2 emission within CORSIA. And we will talk about that in more detail in the upcoming slides. So this is we have seen this presentation before. This is the MRV cycle in CORSIA. So first it starts with the aeroplane operator that have developed an emission monitoring plan, and I think you're all familiar with that, I mean the airlines. Emission monitoring plan that is developed by the airline, submitted to the state that approved this emission monitoring plan, and it's a really communication tool between the aeroplane operator and the state. No need to be shared with ICAO. It's really the aeroplane operator explaining how they are going to monitor, verify, and report their emission, and the state that agrees with this MRV mechanism implemented by the aeroplane operator. Once it's approved, then the aeroplane operator starts the monitoring in accordance with the EMP approved. And every year, the aeroplane operator monitor this emission, collect this emission, and at the end of the year, the following year, the aeroplane operator is going to develop an emission report from the previous year. This emission report, that's the ER on the slide, that's this emission report is going to be then verified. We will have one emission report and one verification report. And these two documents are going to be sent to the state. So this is going to be done every year in accordance to the emission monitoring plan that has been developed and approved. What you see on the slide is this relation with the aeroplane operator and the state, with the role of the verification body that look at the emission report that has been developed by the aeroplane operator. Verification body look at this report with the EMP in mind, the emission monitoring plan in mind, because this is the rules on how the report and the monitoring is done. And then once the verification is done, the state will receive emission monitoring plan, emission report, verification report. The state will assess the information, will verify this information, and once the state is confident that the data is robust enough, then the data is submitted to ICAO. And this is the upcoming deadline for the state, 31st of July. This is the state submitting this information to ICAO. So this is the MRV cycle, and we will see this in more detail in the upcoming slide. Next. The one I wanted to highlight as well is about the accreditation of verification body. So a verification body needs to be accredited by a national accreditation body in order to be eligible to verify the emission report within CORSIA. So how does it work? This is an internal process within the state. So you have a national accreditation body that is going to look at the different verification body within the state, check that they are compliant with some of the requirements, such as the CORSIA requirements, such as the ISO requirement. And once this national accreditation body is confident that the verification body is complying with the different reference document, then it is accredited. And then the state will inform ICAO on the verification bodies that have been accredited within the state. Doesn't mean that airline operator needs to use verification body from your state. Airline operator can use verification body from any state, provided that they have been accredited by a national accreditation body and then reported by your state to ICAO. Is that clear what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. It must be listed. So once the state sends it to ICAO, then ICAO publish a document taking the information from all the verification body that have been accredited by national accreditation body, and this list is then available on the website, and I showed you before where to get it on the ICAO public website. So this is not up to date, it was in December, but we have, I don't know how many we have now, and we need to check, but as of December 2021, we had 77 verification body accredited in 39 states. Well, actually, it's still valid, so sorry, we are in July. And in November, state will send us to ICAO the new list of verification body, and in December 2022, we will publish a new list of verification body. Maybe we'll have more, hopefully, and we will have more verification body accredited in other states. So this is the current document, sorry. Okay, and we publish this document once a year after the state submitted to ICAO their list of verification body accredited in their state. Make sense what I said? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's the process for the accreditation of verification body. Thank you.
Maybe important to highlight also, Blandine, that there might be accredited verification bodies operating in a country which are not accredited in that country. So there's going to be a mix, because Blandine has highlighted that any accredited verification body in any country can verify reports from any operator in the world. That's why in Portugal you could see some verifiers accredited by Portuguese authorities, but there might be other verifiers accredited by other authorities from other countries also working with operators. There's going to be a mix of that. Yeah. What is clear that you cannot use a verifier that is not in the list as just highlighted. Okay. Yes. So we're going to go a little bit in more detail on which is the information flow in this verification process in the whole compliance cycle. So as has been highlighted by Blandine, the operator needs to annually submit an emissions report to the Civil Aviation Authority, and this annual emission report is subject to this verification procedure. Okay. One recommendation from ICAO within the CORSIA recommended practices is to do an internal pre-verification. So the operator makes an internal pre-verification, but this is a recommendation, not a requirement. Okay, so normally once the team in charge of doing the emission reports in an operator, before giving it to the verifier, normally what is done is that a different department within the operator do a cross-checking, like a pre-verification process to cross-check that the data are correct. Then normally, once has been pre-verified, again, that is a voluntary option, the report goes to the verification, to an accredited verification body. The aeroplane operator chooses which verification body they want to work with, but they are obliged to engage with one of the accredited ones. And then important also to highlight that the verification body needs to conduct the verification in accordance with a number of rules established in the SARPs, in the standard. Okay, those rules are a combination by a ISO 14064 standard combined with Annex 16 Volume 4 establishing specific requirements of aviation. So there is like general standardized verification procedures that have been applied to other in other contexts like financing, but then it's adapted with a specific aviation requirements developed in Annex 16. That combination establishes the requirements that apply to this verification process. Okay, once the verification body revises the reports, they issue what is called a verification report. Okay, this verification report, if everything is there are no what we call misstatements or non-conformities, we will not go much into detail in the definitions, but that both misstatements and non-conformities are very well defined in the SARPs. If everything is correct, then it's verified as satisfactory. It can also be, let's say, verified, but as satisfactory with comments. So there can be what it's called like non-material misstatements, so like no fundamental mistakes, but they can be small errors that can be recommended to be amended, but still is verified as satisfactory. But then if there are identified what are defined as material misstatements or non-conformities, then the report would be verified as non-satisfactory. So that emissions report would need to be resubmitted to the operator and be repeated, because it cannot be submitted to the authority if it's verified as non-satisfactory. Hope this also it's clear. It's very similar to any other sort of auditing procedures applied to many other sectors. Okay. Once the verification body produces the verification report, the operator and the verification body both submit the emissions report and the verification report to the state, to the civil aviation authority in this case, or to the competent authority depending on the case. Finally, Blandine has just mentioned that the state, in any case, needs to ensure, cross-check, that that information is correct prior to submit it to ICAO. So also one of the recommendations on the environmental technical manual is what is called the orders of magnitude check of emissions reports from the competent authorities. So the competent authorities still need to make a cross-checking of information, and there is a procedure for doing this order of magnitude that maybe, Blandine, you wish to comment a bit more in detail. This is included in, as I mentioned, in the environmental technical manual, which is part of what we call the CORSIA package. It's not the SARPs, but are the recommended practices. And well, there are specific recommendations on that. Maybe, Blandine, you wish to briefly comment.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add quickly on this one, this is very important because the authorities, the state, are the one responsible for the quality of the data that they're submitting to ICAO. So the state, they need to feel comfortable with the quality of the data that they submit. So this tool, this table, has been developed to support the state when they are receiving the data from the airplane operator. So this has been developed to support the state when they review the data. So what they are supposed to look at, how they can do a check. And you have a table with, I forgot now, I think 45 items for the state to check the data that they receive from the operator. So this is a tool that we are updating it. One of the Cape Working Group is working on that. And we are going to have a new version of this table to facilitate, because some of the wording was not as self-explanatory as we want it to be. So we are updating this, and this is to reply to your question before on the role of Cape. Yeah, we continue to work and to update our document to make them the more robust and the more coherent as possible. And so, as an example, this document is being updated, and you will have a new version in the future. But right now, that's the version available. This is a table that has been developed to support the state to do this order of magnitude check. So this is what I think we wanted to say here, right?
Yes, just the last slides of this presentation.
Yes.
It's a number of questions and answers. We will not go into detail, but
no.
You might.
This is some question that we have taken from the FAQ, the CORSIA frequently asked question that I showed you before, and I told you that's one of the main document when you want to implement CORSIA, to make sure that you have everything clear and a clear picture. So this is some of the questions from the FAQ linked to the verification. So you can get, for example, information of, and Cesar mentioned this pre-verification that the airline has to do. If this is going to be a substitute to the third-party verification, but no, actually no, it's not. So you still need to go through a verification from a third-party verification. So you have this question. We put this question as well on the CERT, because some airlines can use a CERT to do this emission monitoring and reporting. If this can prevent, if I can use this word, the airlines to have a verification body checking the data, well, no, they need to have a verification body even if they are using the CERT to the report and to the monitoring of their aviation emission. So you have some question like that we put in the presentation, because I believe the presentation will be shared with everybody, so you still have access to the website to make sure that you have access to the FAQ and some of the questions that we wanted to make sure was clear from our presentation. I think that's it from us. Thank you.
Questions, maybe?
Just a comment. I guess I would like, but you can elaborate. It was maybe it was important to make a point here because CAPE also developed some guidelines to online verifications because we got COVID, and after that it was seen the need for online verifications, and CAPE also developed this, so
Yeah.
you might go around the team, please.
Yeah, thank you. So exactly. So during one of the elements of the verification was the on-site visit that the verification body was supposed to do at the aeroplane operators entity to check the data, check how the monitoring was done, how the reporting was done. And because of COVID and because of this limited possibility to go and visit what was happening at the aeroplane operators, we, CAPE, when I say we, it's we ICAO in CAPE, we came out with some guidelines to support the work to be done by the verification body during this period of COVID, and indeed to provide some flexibility on the inside. I mean, that was the main point, the inside visit as well, to have this done remotely to facilitate the review of the data. So yes, CAPE, the objective of CAPE, and I'm going to enlarge it a little bit here, is really to provide assistance and to develop new mechanisms, new tools, new guidance to support the work to be done by the state and to facilitate the implementation of the SARBs. So, but thank you very much for bringing this.
On that side question, more related to the regulators, we've noticed, I think we've pulled something interesting from this, which is verification, not on-site verification works. I think probably in most cases. Will we be aiming for that in the future, and avoid extra costs in the on-site verification, which I think operators have a lot of costs in the whole verification process. Could we also aim to skip that on-site in the future? I don't know if each CAA will have some opinion on this. If IATA, if regulators, I don't know.
So if it's a question for the CA, I'm going to look at the CA to reply to this question. But from the ICAO point of view, the verification has to be done via third-party verification. It's discussion between the airplane operator and the verification body. I mean, it's a market discussion, let's say. So you have to find the best verification body for your needs. So you have to check what is on the market, and get one of the verification body that is available on the ICAO document to make sure that the verification is done. Having said that, if you have, so you have this agreement with your verification body. So you have a contract, and you can do some pre-interim verification report that you can have this, how do you call that, this verification, so your verification body can come and get some sample of your data throughout the year before you send the full package. So this is also going to ease the work of your verification body. So maybe they won't have that amount of hours that they have to spend because they're going to send in one time all your data from the last year, and they will have to go through all the entire verification. So this is going to be maybe more time consuming. And I know that some verification body offer that. They propose to the airlines to receive some sample of that data so they understand how it works. And the more you have this communication between the airline and the verification body, the better the quality of the data will be in both sides, the less time the verification body is going to spend on your verification of your data. So there is also this kind of work that you need to have with your verification body, and this communication that you need to have with them. I've been talking with some verification bodies to see with them how they work, and they really encourage the airline, the authority and the verification body to talk together, to beeline the three parties together when they are preparing the verification of the data. And I think that's maybe something as well that you can investigate in the future.
If I may complement on that briefly, it's also important to distinguish what is the standard and what is a recommended practice. So the standard is obliged to be fulfilled, the recommended practice is not. The on-site verification is not mandatory, is not on the standard, is a highly recommended practice. So that's why it was possible during the pandemic to verify without fulfilling the SARP requirements. So again, this is, as mentioned, is a balance that needs to be reached, but formally it can be done without on-site. There's high recommendation on do at least some on-site visits. That's, let's say, the formal really answer to your question, I think, important to distinguish. Thank you.
I think from our side, I think Artur also wants to intervene, but from our side, I think there's one stop that we cannot avoid, which is to have a third party, an independent third party to verify all the data. That we cannot go around. Now we would be interested in understanding better what are the costs that you are referring to, monetary, timing, so that we can understand, because in principle, competition and the enlargement of the number of verifiers would put prices down, so that would lower your costs on a monetary basis. And as a cost is considered the timing that you lose, also they will be more competitive on that, because they will be just competing for all the customers that they have. Yes. And as you saw, there are less verifiers than states, so they tend to be more global, gain some scale, learn from each other, but still we would be interested in knowing what costs you are referring to specifically. But I don't know, Artur, I think you wanted to comment?
Trying to answer to your question and for the work already going on this, I guess that even, and I guess IPAC is already is attending also the meeting, so maybe if they are still online, I guess they are for the morning. I don't know if they still for the afternoon, but they can complement this that I will say. I guess from both from environmental agency, both from our national accreditation body, nothing can take the place of a verification on spot, because it's the sense of the verification. But I guess that with COVID, this make all us aware of the possible and the benefit of the remote verification. So I guess we'll have in the future, and I can say that at least at CAPE we are already in this direction. I guess it will be hybrid, and you will get both worlds. So at least not every year, but I guess that in a compliance cycle you will find a way to visit physically every one of the airline operators. I hope this helps.
Oh yeah. Ai, meu Deus do céu. Olha.
I think we have a question online, but are they ready? If not, I do have a question first, and it's related to this one, so maybe I can come up. And I would like to understand better a little bit on the costs and benefits of airlines using CERT, which does not, of course, imply not having a verification body, but what are the advantages and the advantages both for ICAO, which I believe that you would get the number, so that would be at least an advantage, for national CAAs and for airlines? Can you just sort of do a comparison? Thank you.
Actually, it's not necessarily about advantages or not. It's about if you are allowed or not to use CERT.
Okay.
So CERT is a tool that has been developed to facilitate the work of airlines and state as well. So when you receive the report, it's also a way for you to assess the information that you receive. But CERT has been developed to support aeroplane operators that are below a certain threshold.
Okay.
So only, and it's one of the tools that can be used to monitor the data. And if you are below a certain threshold, then you can use CERT. If you're above, then you have to use the 5 monitoring methods that are described in the SARBs. So it's more one possibility for the airlines. When they are below a certain threshold, they can use CERT or not.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
So now it's yeah.
And also CERT is a tool even for the operators that are not eligible to use CERT. Still CERT is a tool to fill gaps, error gaps. So there might be a certain level of information gaps that the SARBs allow to be filled using the CERT for operators which are above that threshold. But as Blandine says, it depends on whether you are eligible or not. And
exactly.
CERT is also a useful tool for operators who still have a relatively small number of operators to check whether they are, also for the authority to check whether they are close or not to the threshold on being within CORSIA. So the authority can also use CERT to check whether an operator, as you know more or less which are their annual operations, you can use the CERT to check whether they are below the 10,000 tons threshold to be in CORSIA or not. So it's still a tool that it's very useful.
It is very useful, but if you can only use CERT as a monitoring method if you are below the certain threshold.
Yes.
Then it's a
That
tool
was my
available
point.
to everybody,
Yes.
of course,
Yeah.
and it can help you to estimate, to check the data that you get or to fill some data gap. But officially to be used as monitoring method, then it's for certain airlines.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, thank you. So we get 2 questions online, one from EPAC. Go ahead if you can hear us. Not the image that I was expecting, but we'll get there. So I believe that we have 2 questions, one from EPAC and another from the Portuguese Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Carlos Gomes. Carlos,
Thank you very much. Thank you
Okay.
very much. I'm here.
the floor is yours.
Good
Carlos.
afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Is about the reports for Blandine and Cesar as well. What is the difference between the emissions reports and the verification report? If I understand well, the verify is sent to both to an airplane, but I'm doubt about in substance, what is the difference between one from another?
So thank you very much, Carlos. So the emission report is the amount of CO2 that has been collected by the airline operator per route. So it's per state pair, and they send this report to the authority. The verification report is going to be a report developed by the verification body, and it's going to assess the emission report. So what you will see on the verification report is if the emission report is compliant with the EMP, if there is no data gap, if there is no misconformity or misstatement, and you will have all this assessment of the emission report. So the verification report is going to tell you if the emission report from your aeroplane operator is satisfactory or not. So it's 2 different documents. One is the amount of
But
CO2.
no corrective actions are included.
Oh, no, you can. You can have corrective action for the aeroplane operator, and the verification body can send back to the, I'm looking at you, I'm sorry, not necessarily, but I'm looking at TAP representative, so that's why. So the verification body can go back to the aeroplane operator and say, well, this is missing, information missing, you need to check that, of course, and they can propose corrective action. Yes, the verification body should do that, actually. They should support the aeroplane operator to have a better reporting, in the sense that they should be compliant with the EMP, so they could provide some feedback, clearly, yes.
But the operator sends only one report to the competent authority, yes?
The aeroplane operator sends the emission report and is going to send the verification report, and the verification body will send as well the verification report to the state. So the state will receive the state will receive 3 reports, let's say. 1 emission report, 1 verification report from 1 operator, and then the verification body can send that to the state as well, for 1 operator. Then you receive, each time you have an operator, you receive this combo.
But if I may
Thank
clarify,
you.
Carlos, in the information flow that we have just shown in the presentation, it's important that the emissions report that the operator sends to the authority is like the final one, once verified. So there's an intermediate process,
Yeah.
while even in the verification process, still the operator can make corrections before sending the final verified report to the authority. So in the process of verification, you can identify like data gaps, etc., that there's still time to fill before getting the final verified report that is sent to the authority.
Yes.
So it's a process.
Thank you, Cesar. Yes, I know. Just a note to tell you that the competent authority in Portugal is not the Civil Aviation Authority, it's the Environment Agency. Just a note. Thank you.
Similar situation to several European states. Normally, and I believe it's also the case in Portugal, the Civil Aviation Authority nevertheless plays a technical role supporting the competent authority. I know it's the same case in Spain and other similar situations in European member states. There's let's say, a cooperation between both ministries, and the final outcome is...
Exactly.
But
Thank
also
you very much.
I understand here in Portugal, the authority who reports to ICAO through the CORSIA Central Registry, I assume it is ANAC.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
It's also the body who reports to ICAO.
Yeah.
Even the competent authority is a different agency or ministry. Yeah.
You are right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I believe that EPAC is ready to ask the question. Alberto Mosqueira,
He's joining.
he's left and he's coming back. Alberto, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me now? Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Yes, please.
Sorry for the technical delays. We had to shuffle some meetings around, but we are back here in the afternoon. I just wanted not to ask a question, but to add something to what Artur has said regarding, if I remember well, the point was about remote and on-site verifications. So we believe that the future scenario is going to be mostly on-site verifications. If possible, maybe some hybrid with some of the preparation work being done remotely, but this is all dependent on the authorization of the competent authority. And what we can say, drawing a parallel from the other verification activities for greenhouse gases, is that remote verifications have not been authorized. There's one situation that was authorized for one verification body, but in other sectors. And so I think the position of the competent authority is also to maintain on-site verifications. The risk associated with doing all the remote work is a bit higher. So I believe we can have a hybrid scenario with part of verification being done remotely, but I think the majority of them is going to be still done on-site, even for the aviation sector. If I added something to what Artur said, but I'm open to any other additional clarifications that the colleagues may need. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. Are there any further questions on this topic? So we can proceed. I believe that we have a presentation right now from the Environmental Agency. regarding CORSIA and ETS. Good afternoon, Eduardo. Can you hear us?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello,
Can
how
you
are
hear me
you?
well? Very good. Thanks for the invitation. Are you going to project from there, or should I share my screen?
Honestly, I don't really know. I think that's going to be projected from here, Eduardo.
Very good.
Now we can see you. How are you?
Good. Just listening to the discussion.
Very good. I believe that some instructions are being made in the message on your left panel, right panel. Is it the presentation going to be, Sandra, the presentation is going to be from Eduardo's sharing the screen? Yeah, yes. So Eduardo, can you share your screen, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, can you see?
Yes.
Can you see my screen now? Let me just put this on.
Yes, perfect.
No. Okay. It's okay?
Yeah, the floor is yours, Eduardo.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for the invitation to address the workshop relating to EU ETS and the implementation of CORSIA, which is obviously the way that EU member states are implementing or have chosen to implement CORSIA. This is obviously stems from the background that EU member states have on implementing policies for directed to emission reduction in the aviation sector. Already 10 years plus in implementation of such policies through the EU ETS. So obviously many of the issues that have been addressed, and in particular in the last panel, are well known for the aviation operators in Portugal and in other EU member states. So I'll divide the presentation into two parts. One more relating to past, present, and the other one, the more substantial one, with regards to what the Fit for 55 revision of legislation brings us for the EU, for the 2030 target, and for the relation with implementation of CORSIA. So, as I was mentioning, the ETS directive has, since 2008, included aviation as one of the activities, and the directive, the revised version from 2018, introduced specifications with regards to the relationship for ETS, aviation, and CORSIA. From 2017, member states decided to implement CORSIA through the EU ETS, and this obviously translates into the directive, and from additional regulation that basically translates what is the regulation from ICAO, articulated with regulation at EU level, and then we have the way that our operators are to implement both regimes. Obviously, here we are aiming at streamlining and not duplicating efforts on the part of the operators. We are talking about accounting for emissions, even though the schemes are obviously different. Three-year compliance cycles in CORSIA, a different setting in UETS with annual implementation and verification. Annual verification also on the part of CORSIA, but then the offsetting is on the 3-year periods. One thing I should say with regards to the monitoring and reporting and to the accreditation and verification, obviously there are, and this stems also from the experience in the UETS, there are specific rules that are being implemented at EU level, and through fine-tunings on the part of the Commission, which has this responsibility, whenever there is additional guidance being provided at ICAO level, where obviously all member states are also there represented and agree to the policy being stated there, it then needs to be translated again back to EU legislation. This is obviously something that it's more of a burden on the member states, on the states themselves, and again, the objective here is always to try to streamline as much as possible the two regimes and not add burden to the operators implementing them. One note with regards to the verification process, as the colleague from IPAC was saying, obviously there is this implementing regulation from the part of the Commission, which also states the guidelines that all member states and all competent authorities from the member states need to follow, and the guidance there still is that we have on-site verification as a rule, and we can derogate it to a virtual verification on a very strict and restricted number of provisions. Obviously, COVID came into line and ticked the boxes in those provisions. But again, the rule is still to be on-site verification. So one of the main new things that we had in 2019 was this Commission delegated regulation, which followed the 2018 revision of the directive, which provided further guidance towards the implementation of CORSIA regime through the UETS. It basically addresses how the monitoring, reporting, and verification of the aviation emissions should be followed through by the part of the airline operators, and pretty much establishes and prepares the ground in the preparation phase for the pilot phase of CORSIA. So coming now to what is really more the new things that we have with the Fit for 55, and after 2019, obviously we had major breakthroughs in terms of policy making for climate in the EU. One of which was the carbon neutrality goal by 2050, and the other, obviously, the new 2030 target of at least 55% by 2030, which translate in the need for revising all of the legislation that was in place at the time for delivering climate policy or climate objectives for 2030. So here you have the full well, kind of full, because after the original release of the big package, which is the Fit for 55, with some 16 or 17 regulations and directives being changed or addressed, and afterwards, and some more were added to the list. So at the moment we have 20 plus pieces of legislation being revised. I'll turn your attention to 3 of them. Obviously, the EU ETS for the aviation sections, the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, which also has some provisions specific to aviation, and the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, focusing more on alternative sustainable fuels, which also has quite a role to play in this decade. So the Commission presented the Fit for 55 package in July last year. We now have the position from the European Parliament adopted 8th June this year, and the Council also adopted its position on COREPER and on the ETS general approach in the last days of June of last month. So at the moment we are basically preparing for the trilogues, and what we thought would be interesting to convey in the rest of the presentation is where we are with regards to the positions of the three legislative bodies in the EU with regards to some of the key features of the EU ETS and with obvious relation to CORSIA. So on the geographical scope, both the Council and the Commission adopted the clean cut option, which basically means that all EU ETS, all intra-European flights, including UK and Switzerland, fall within the remit of the EU ETS and are addressed through that mechanism. And all extra-European flights fall under the remit of CORSIA. The Parliament has a different stance on this, so we will need to see how the negotiations in the trilogue will go. And basically, their view is to extend the scope of the EU ETS to all flights. So basically, to once again have a full scope EU ETS addressing all flights within all flights to and from EU aerodromes. Another important element is with regards to exemptions from allowances surrendering, and thus carving out the distinction between CORSIA and EU ETS compliance. So basically, the Council adopted the same provisions as the Commission had put forward, and we'll get to what the Parliament adopted. But basically, what the Commission put forward is airlines from CORSIA implementing countries would not, with respect to flights to and from those countries, would not need to surrender allowances. Flights to and from non-CORSIA implementing countries before 2027 would also not need to surrender allowances. LDCs and SID flights also. And there is a provision that the European Commission can develop further guidance if there is some competition distortion detected in the meantime. Here, the guiding principle here is obviously to not impose on the same route, both systems. So the guiding principle for the implementation is always it's either EU ETS or CORSIA. So there is no duplication of the regimes on any given route. As mentioned, the Council adopted pretty much the same stance, and the Parliament wants to delete the exemption or flexibility for the least developed countries. With regards to free allocation, this is one change basically with relation to the EU ETS. There's a gradual phase out of free allocation from 2024 to 2026 and full auctioning by 2027 onwards, with the Council having a provision of a 20 million free allowances to compensate for SAF costs, and there are some provisions where you see how that applies in order also to try to incentivize SAF coming online. The Parliament has a more ambitious stance, so full auctioning from 2025, and a 20 million plus 20 million allowances to finance SAF support from January 2024. So again, we'll need to see how it evolves in the negotiation in the trilogues. Offsetting requirements, pretty much, well, I guess here I would characterize it as the Commission left it a bit more open in its proposal, leaving more detail to delegated acts, and the Council, as is tradition and usual, tried to provide additional guidance in this respect. But here I would not see very big issues with regards to the three positions. With regards to the emission factor, the Council basically adopted a provision where the emission factor that is being used under ICAO would also apply under the EU ETS, which is one of the differences that we have at the moment, by a very, very small figure. So basically here I would characterize this as being one of those issues where the Council adopted a position of streamlining the implementation of both regimes, trying to facilitate the life of everyone implementing. I would stop at that. Obviously, the trilogues will take place during this semester, and hopefully we will come to a quick resolution on this file, because obviously the implementation is the crucial part now, and we really need to start turning on the implementing acts that are foreseen in the legislation in order to provide that guidance or that further guidance to everyone, member states, airline operators, etc. So thanks for this, and I'm available for any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Eduardo, for this clear presentation regarding ETS proposal with CORSIA. Are there any questions? Yes, TAP. And Cesar? Okay, so TAP, please, the floor is yours.
Well, not seeming, but I'm Rui Soeiro from TAP Air Portugal. So my question is regarding the monitoring methods, because CORSIA allows different monitoring methods, but ETS is more restricted. So, and because we are obliged by the EU regulation to use the EU ETS monitoring methods, what is the position on that regard?
Eduardo, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
As member states, we all of us have notified differences from the ETS to CORSIA to the ICAO on how we will be implementing. I would say that is one of the aspects that is focused there. There are those two methods that are admitted under the EU ETS, and those are the methods that for member states airlines will also be used with regards to the CORSIA estimation of the emissions, and then the compliance cycle.
Thank you. Cesar, would you like to jump in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Boa tarde, Eduardo. Muito obrigado. Very useful presentation on this important question, this important topic that, as we all know, is being very, really the focus of current European discussions. I have, it's between a question or comment. It would be a question if you can have a feedback or an answer, but I'm not really sure if you still know the answer. As you know, at ECAC, we represent 44 member states, including all the European Union states, plus UK, plus Switzerland. But we've got, of course, in these discussions, while we don't interfere in the European Union current regulatory process, but we have received feedback from some of the non-EU, a part of UK and Switzerland member states. The main concern, you have referred to it in your presentation, is the possibility of having a double imposition, because as the European Commission proposal was raised, there were no mechanisms to avoid that, because non-EU member states will initially, they are expected to apply the CORSIA SARPs in their national regulations. So operations within the European Union, and even in the scenario that the Parliament proposal, like the non-clean cut option, flights from outside the European Union space would apply ETS, those member states would still need to apply CORSIA in the flights of their non-EU operators within the EU. But then, because of the implementation of the ETS, ETS would also apply. So you are saying that the guiding principle, I think it's clear that the intention is not to have a double imposition, but there's a high concern on which is the mechanism, because it still has not been established. So as it is now, the European Union regulation cannot regulate what other states do and implement CORSIA. So the European Union cannot establish Turkey exempting their flights to Europe, but a Turkish airline flight within Europe would have initially CORSIA plus ETS. So maybe you want to comment or elaborate in that concern that has been raised. And a second comment I make, we will be talking after this on sustainable aviation fuels. And for example, another open question is whether, and there's going to be part of the Fit for 55 you have mentioned is the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative. We will talk later. All the fuel supplied within the European Union will need to fulfill with the European Union Renewable Energy Directive sustainability criteria. But within CORSIA, there's also very similar, but not exactly the same sustainability criteria mechanism. So again, there's still an open question, and we have fuel suppliers in the room. So there's still a concern, an open question from the energy sector, especially on whether the fuel in Europe will need to fulfill two different sustainability requirements to comply with both with CORSIA and the ETS. I know you might not have the answers because this is still an open discussion, but if you have any thoughts or comments or news on those, I'm sure it's of interest of the audience as well. Thank you very much, Eduardo.
Thanks. Well, I'll take those as comments, and I'll add some comments also, and maybe one of my colleagues online can also come in with further details. But I'll leave my comments on a more general policy-based level. Obviously, no one is saying that it's not a challenge to run these two systems, and the EU is obviously very aware of that, and we at the moment we are operating within the scope of the guiding principle. So we are at the level of the directive. And we have in this proposal of revision of the ETS directive, finally we have quite a substantive guidance being provided with regards to the implementation of CORSIA. Further guidance will obviously need to be developed, and that is why I ended my presentation also with a note of stressing the urgency of closing the directive, because at the moment we are going into the trilogue phase. So there is an urgency in closing that discussion on the directive, precisely because then it's only then we can go into those fine-tuned technical details and some of those that you are addressing. Obviously, also ICAO, the Assembly, has always a provision also to set up additional or further guidance, which we again would need to bring home and try to translate. It has its challenges, but again, I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as having double standards. I mean, the European market is quite a big one, and I'm sure we'll find solutions to accommodate the differences that may be there, and still make this something that is very, very innovative and delivers on the results that we all strive for. So I'll pass if you allow me, I would like to have Ana Reis to also come in on this question.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Hello.
Okay. Hello. I just want to add a little something regarding the double counting that you mentioned. The Council has foreseen a mechanism to prevent the third country aircraft operators to have their emissions double counted. Either they have to, in the EEA space, they have the ETS they have to wow. And outside the EEA space, they have the CORSIA to implement. And to avoid that double count for the third country aircraft operators, the Council has foreseen a mechanism. The costs that they have with the CORSIA implementation will be deducted to the ETS costs. They just have to notify differences to the ICAO. Those third countries have to do that. But that is still on the is still going to be discussed in the trilogues. So nothing is final right now. So here we have to wait and see what is going to be the final option. I hope this has helped.
Thank you, Ana Reis. I think that we have another viewer that wants to ask a question. I believe it's Carlos Gomes from the Portuguese Civil Aviation Authority. Good afternoon, Carlos.
Again, good afternoon, and thank you very much. Again.
You're very welcome.
Hello, Eduardo. Thank you. Hello, Eduardo. How are you? I'm completely in line with what Cesar said in the first part of their comment. The proposals established that to avoid the double counting, the aircraft operator from the third country have to notify difference to ICAO. Our question is that we know that is a political decision, but the question is completely the spirit of the Bratislava Declaration that Cesar mentioned this morning. That's a remark, a comment, and our contribution, from Civil Aviation Authority, is always to highlight this kind of controversial decision, the clean-cut decision. One of the reasons is that we have to send some kind of advice to third countries, to states, not for operators, to advise their operators for states notify difference to ICAO that in Europe will not comply with the CORSIA. That's why the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. I believe João Ferreira from iFly wants to have a comment. Thank you.
On the second line, as far as I remember, back in 2011, some non-third country parties have established legislation to make their operators not comply with EU ETS, like China, for example. I think Russia as well. So if they won't be in EU ETS mandatorily, in the mandatory as it may eventually begin, won't that create a market distortion? As far as I can see. And what perspective may have EU to protect equality in terms of airlines?
Eduardo, could you clarify your views on this or help us bring light to this challenging discussion? Thank you.
I would say that would constitute a legal discussion also. Probably a very long one,
yeah.
and not an easy one. But yes, I would put it more on those terms of a legal discussion of what is possible with that, and that is not new territory with regards to the implementation of the ETS aviation, obviously, because if there is one thing that this file has had over the last decade is legal controversy. But I would also say that it has produced some very good results, very interesting results, and not only at the European Union level.
If I may add something, on the Council proposal, it's foreseen if an aircraft operator is subject to these differences in routes to third countries, they can apply to the Commission saying that they are being, they have, while they have to comply with the CORSIA in this route to this third country that is not applying CORSIA or is applying in a different matter than the EU is, the Commission in the Council proposal can give that to that aircraft operator a derogation, and he will not be obliged to deliver licenses for that route. That is foreseen in the Council proposal. But as Eduardo said, that is going to go to trilogues in this second semester, and then we'll have a final, hopefully, till the end of the year, a final proposal.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you, Eduardo. Are there any further comments on this particular topic? No, thank you for your clear presentations. And since we have took some time debating this topic, very interesting and challenging topic, I would invite you all to a coffee break, a 10-minute break, and we will resume in 10 minutes. So I'll see you soon. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the second half of the afternoon session of our workshop. Thank you. Of our workshop on capacity building on environment. We have been having some fruitful discussions, and the last panel will be addressing sustainable aviation fuels. So we will give the floor to Blandine Ferrier and César Velard in order to give us some clarification on this important topic for aviation. Oh, thank you. Important topic for aviation and for air operators and airports. So, Blandine, César, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in this occasion, this presentation, it's me who's going to be delivering. We agreed on that because before I joined ECAC, I was for many years working on this topic, and I had the privilege to co-chair the Fuels Task Group within the ICAO CAEP. So it's especially my area of expertise. So I've agreed with Blandine. I will deliver this presentation, but of course Blandine might comment also on, she has commented this morning on ACTSAF, but there are also current ICAO next steps on this topic. This is, as you know, one of the key elements of the basket of measures. It's also, we have seen this morning and this afternoon, that it's one of the key elements of CORSIA implementation. So it's really a topic that is getting a lot of attention now. What I'm going to do today, and also, of course, Blandine is reminding me, is one of the fundamental elements of the feasibility of a long-term aspirational goal. So if an agreement on LTAG is reached in ICAO, SAF is going to be the main enabler of aviation decarbonization in the long term. So what we will see today is a general overview, a familiarization of sustainable aviation fuels. We will start on trying to understand what is SAF, how can be produced. I will make a very brief intervention on what are e-fuels. You might, if you haven't heard about it, part of the Fit for 55 package is focusing on what we call e-fuels. We will explain it. Oh, sorry. We will also give an overview on understanding the ICAO sustainability criteria that have been developed in the framework of CORSIA. And then we will end highlighting some recent sustainable aviation fuel global developments. So the first key question is, what are sustainable aviation fuels? And there's not a single answer to that. because SAF is defined, let's say, differently in different regulatory frameworks. The main one, what is clear, is that we have a global definition of SAF that has been agreed at ICAO level, which means it's applicable worldwide, and it's again in the CORSIA standard, Annex 16, Volume 4. So CORSIA sustainable aviation fuel is defined as a renewable or waste-derived aviation fuel that meets the CORSIA sustainability criteria under this volume, under the SARPs, okay? But for example, the UK and other non-EU states are developing SAF mandates, and they are also establishing some definitions of SAF. The European Union, and we will talk about it, has just launched, as part of this Fit for 55 package that Eduardo was just mentioning, the Refuel EU Aviation proposal that also establishes a definition of SAF. So different definitions, but all definitions have two essential common elements. When we talk on sustainable aviation fuels, first, it needs to be sustainable. To be sustainable means that need to comply with specific sustainability criteria. And those criteria will depend on the applicable framework or regulatory scheme, okay? And then it needs to be aviation fuel. To be aviation fuel, obviously need to fulfill the standards of jet fuel. So it needs to comply with the same quality requirements as conventional fuels. Very important, when we talk on SAF, we always refer to what we call drop-in aviation fuels. So are fuels that are fully compatible, that can be mingled with the current fossil fuel, and that can be used in the current aviation fleets. No adaptation of the aircraft technologies are needed. We are always talking on fuels that are fully compatible with the current existing fleets and technologies. The second element, the first element of what are SAF, sustainable, need to be sustainable. There are, I've mentioned that need to comply with sustainability criteria. Again, we have different requirements worldwide. The most important to highlight is the ICAO sustainability criteria. And why so important? Because before this morning we mentioned that CORSIA was the first market-based mechanism applied worldwide to an aviation sector. The sustainability criteria agreed in ICAO, and this is a major achievement, is the first time that globally there has been agreed sustainability framework applicable to a bioenergy sector. So it's the first global standard on sustainability criteria applicable to bioenergy. In addition to the ICAO, which is, as I refer, the global reference, I've also mentioned before that in the European Union, currently all biofuels need to comply with the Renewable Energy Directive. So there are also sustainability criteria there. Also, the UK current consultation to establish a SAF mandate is proposing also criteria, etc. So again, very important to have clear sustainability criteria to comply with. And the second fundamental element to be drop-in aviation fuels, I would like to highlight that in 2009, it was the first time that the American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM, which is one of the standards for aviation fuel, for jet fuel, issued what is called the ASTM D7566 standard. That was the first aviation turbine fuel containing synthesized hydrocarbons. It was the first standard using non-fossil materials to produce jet fuel, okay? It's still the reference standard today. So even the sustainable aviation fuels that are produced in Europe are complying with that ASTM D7566 standard. But currently, just for your information, EASA and also in parallel the UK are developing a new sustainable aviation fuels, what we call qualification process, to develop, let's say, European similar standard applicable to sustainable aviation fuels. So within this ASTM D756 standard, currently, so since 2009 to today, there's been approved already 9 different what we call pathways, which is a combination of feedstock and technology that can produce sustainable aviation fuels. So that means Jet A1, non-fossil based Jet A1. So there are 9 different technological options to produce those. Okay, each of those are in different annexes of that D7566 standard, and 2 of them, which are called co-processing, are annexes of the current fossil fuel standard. Okay, I will not go in detail, but all those different technological options allowed to produce sustainable aviation fuels. All of them currently today need to be blended with fossil fuel to ensure the level of aromatics in the blend, to be sure that comply also with the technological requirements of the fuel system of the aircrafts. But currently there are some new pathways under development, including the possibility of having 100% sustainable aviation fuel, non-fossil, with non-fossil component on it. So that's going to be happening soon. Within SAF, there is a subtype that is called electrofuels. There are 3 different nominations you might hear. If you haven't heard about it, you might hear in the future. There are 3 concepts that are exactly the same. It's called power to liquid, PTL, synthetic fuels, or electrofuels. Basically, all those use as feedstock CO2. So CO2 is an illimited feedstock. Either it can be taken from directly from the atmosphere, it can also be taken from the combustion of biomass, or it can be also taken from fossil CO2 from industrial processes. So it's what we call recycled carbon from CO2 industrial processes. So basically this technology what takes CO2 and also uses water to produce hydrogen, and through a Fischer-Tropsch, called Fischer-Tropsch technology, can produce sustainable aviation fuels. I will not go much into detail for the sake of time, but just for you to know that this is a pathway, this is a subtype that the European Commission, for example, within the European Union Refuel EU Aviation Initiative is putting a lot of effort, and it will be a sub-mandate on this type of fuels. And for example, Germany has established already like a pathway to establish a sub-mandate as well of electrofuels at national level, okay? There are, with this subtype, there are very important challenges. First is that there's a high use of power, of renewable energy. When I mean power is renewable energy, so there's going to be a competition with other sources. The whole economy in Europe and worldwide needs to decarbonize, so many things will go to electric, but then we will need also electricity to produce e-fuels. So there's still a big question mark whether there will be sufficient renewable energy to feed that. The technology is not yet mature. There's no yet commercial production, but it is expected that especially after 2030 could be commercially available in Europe. And today still has high production costs. But just for you to know, that is one of the pathways where at European level there's a lot of focus on it. Let me continue with trying to explain the ICAO sustainability criteria for what we call CORSIA eligible fuels. Here we refer to CORSIA eligible fuels because within CORSIA there are 2 types. One are sustainable aviation fuels. The second type is what are called lower carbon aviation fuels, which basically are fossil fuels, but that in the production process the carbon footprint is reduced through carbon capture and other technologies. That is what it's called lower carbon aviation fuels, but here we will be focusing especially in today I'm talking on sustainable aviation fuels, but just for you to know that are those types. So the background of the CORSIA sustainability criteria, it was the ICAO assembly decisions already in 2013 highlighted the need to develop renewable energies for aviation that need to comply with the multiple dimensions of sustainability. That means not only environmental, but also social and economic, okay? So there are assembly resolutions referring to it. So the sustainability criteria have been developed, already approved in different chapters. The first chapter that was approved, it's applicable for fuels or CORSIA eligible fuel produced before January 2024. So it's only for the pilot phase and only contains 2 sustainability criteria, because at that point there was only agreement on these 2 first. The sustainability criteria that only refer to CO2 emission reductions. So the first criteria, the first 2 criteria applicable during the pilot phase only refers to greenhouse gas emissions. I just want to here also highlight that the sustainability criteria within CORSIA have 3 elements. First, it has what we call a theme. The theme is the environmental topic that is covered by the standard. So, for example, greenhouse gases is the first theme. For each theme, you can have 1 or more principles. Principles are the requirement that has been agreed for a sustainable production. And I put as an example, for the theme greenhouse gas, the principle is that CORSIA eligible fuels should generate lower carbon emissions on a life cycle basis. That is the principle. And then for each theme and principle, you can have 1 or several criteria. The criteria are the specific conditions that need to be met and that can be measured or assessed to achieve the principle. So let's say the criteria is what will need to be certified that is complying with, and that must be measurable. So for example, for the theme greenhouse gas principle need to be lower than conventional fuel. The criterion 1.1 is CORSIA eligible fuels will achieve a greenhouse gas emission reduction of at least 10% compared to the baseline life cycle emission values for aviation fuels, okay? So at ICAO level, the minimum requirement is to achieve a 10% greenhouse gas emission reduction, which can be perceived as a very modest, but at that time was a major achievement at global level, okay? Just for your knowledge. So the second chapter of CORSIA sustainable criteria for eligible fuels will be applicable for SAF, only for sustainable aviation fuels, not for LCAF, produced on or after 1st of January 2024. And this includes a total set of 12 sustainability themes, okay? So it adds 10 additional themes covering environmental and socio-economic criteria. For example, water, soil protection, air conservation, waste and chemicals, and in the socio-economic side, it addresses human labor rights, land use rights, water use rights, local and social development, and for example, food security, okay? And currently there is also ongoing work in CAEP, in the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection, to develop new criteria, which will be the Chapter 3 applicable to LCAF, lower carbon aviation fuels. That has not yet been agreed, okay? But what is very important to highlight is that currently all those 12 themes constitute a wide range of criteria that ensure that not only environmental but also social and economic elements, components of sustainability are covered in this standard, okay? You can see like on those 12 there are 3 blocks, mainly criteria related with carbon reduction, some environmental themes and some socioeconomic themes, as we have mentioned, okay? And to wrap up this briefing on sustainable aviation fuels, I would also highlight that especially last year there were 2 major global developments, and we are seeing in the last couple of years, 2021 and 2022 are being particularly active in terms of SAF promotion at global level, in terms of very ambitious policies to promote SAF. And here I refer again to the European Commission adoption of a proposal called Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, but in parallel, the United States, the new, it's not new anymore, but it was new, Biden administration launched also a very ambitious policy package to promote SAF supply at large scale in the United States of America. The Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, what mainly established is a regulatory proposal that is currently still under discussion and development, but basically established an obligation on all fuel suppliers to distribute sustainable aviation fuels in increasing amounts over time in all airports in Europe. Okay? But it also established an obligation on all airlines to uplift aviation fuel at EU airports. So it's applicable to both to the fuel suppliers and to the operators. And both the fuel suppliers and the operators will need to report fulfillment of this regulation. Okay? I don't give more details on Refuel EU Aviation Initiative because it's under discussion, but happy to, of course, address it in the questions and answers. And my last slide, just to conclude this briefing on sustainable aviation fuels, is with this image of the feasibility study on long-term aspirational goals analysis that has been done by the committee, CAEP, the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection. This was referred this morning, and this is big part of the discussion on the feasibility of long-term aspirational goals that will happen in the next assembly. There were, in this very important technical assessment on the feasibility of those goals, you can see on those graphics, those are like the combination of basket of measures that could lead to a long-term decarbonization of aviation. And it goes from a less ambitious scenario, which is IS1, to the most ambitious one, which is IS3. In all of them, the green part that you see on the screen represents the contribution of sustainable aviation fuels to decarbonization. So even in the less ambitious scenario, hopefully this is not the one that it's agreed, hope we get a more ambitious scenario, the role of sustainable aviation fuels in the next years will be enormous. You see that the supply of SAF in the long term will definitely replace an enormous percentage of the current fossil fuel. So this is also a revolution in terms of energy in aviation, how aviation will be fueled, and I conclude my presentation with that reflection on that SAF will become more and more important in the next years. So happy to address any questions, and of course my colleague Blandine might wish to also comment on the current ICAO next steps on SAF, because there's a lot of focus on that. Back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Blandine, do you wish to comment?
Not to comment. I mean, if we have a question, what I want to show again is so where to get information on the fuel. I think Cesar's presentation was very good on SAF. And as Cesar mentioned, I mean, he has been involved in a lot of group within ICAO and CAPE on sustainable aviation fuel. So so I cannot compete with that. But what I want to show you is the website. I don't know if you don't see it yet, but that's going to happen at one point.
I think that you are sharing your screen, right?
I am.
So we hopefully will get to see your screen. Yes.
Yeah,
perfect.
excellent. Thank you. And this is to complement what Cesar has been mentioning and what you have seen on the slide with all the airports that are distributing SAF, the policy, the conversion processes that Cesar mentioned. And if you look at if I can click on the drops, you get more information on each of the elements. So this is, for example, a map where you can get the airport that are distributing sustainable aviation fuel already. So I'm charging the map so you will see it better, and you can see with the dots the 2 times Europe. You can see where to get sustainable aviation fuel with the different elements. You have the same thing for the policies and the policies under development, where and you have also the latest news. So this is something I wanted to showcase here. We talked about AXAF, so I'm not coming back on that point, but everything that has been mentioned by Cesar now and related to ICAO is available on this website, and so you can go and get further detail just to complement what you said. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So are there any questions here in the room or remotely? So TAP?
I don't know how to stop sharing.
Yeah, you can also share experiences.
I can leave it.
Yeah, sure. I guess you saw the news that we operated our first flight with SAF fuels last Friday, in partnership with Galp and Hannah. Yes, I think that everyone in the aviation industry understands that SAF is going to be the future, and it's the tool that will enable us to fulfill the ICAO and other corporations' objectives to reduce the CO2. My question is regarding the refuel legislation that is being prepared by the European Union, and from the proposal that I read, I don't know if it's the final proposal. It was a few months ago. The subject of tinkering was very focused on economic methods, but in reality of current aviation, tinkering is not an economic method. On the main objective of tinkering in operations is not economic, because the fuel price is not that difference between airports, and the cost of fuel is so high that there is no economic value in transporting fuel. And the way that the draft was wrote gives the very little options to the operators to use tinkering as an operation venue. For instance, not all alternate airports are at the same distance. Not all airports have alternates available. So it's very difficult to say, I will use the same fuel from A to B, then B to A. And I think that was not very clear on the legislation, and I'm very concerned that we'll have to pay an extra tax for safety. So I was wondering if you, as ICAO and ECAC, have issued or are aware of this.
Yeah. Well, no, I cannot comment on that. The only thing I can say is I heard this concern from many states, including non-EU states and airlines from non-EU as well, non-EU states. So no, I'm not sure I can comment on that. We have maybe better person on the call from the EU who could reply on this one. No, I don't comment on the EU directive.
I will refer to one of Blandin's boss answer that she always says, Jane Huppy always say, in ICAO, safety is paramount. So obviously safety has to be above all environmental measures. That is obvious in aviation, is key. Again, I cannot comment really in a regulatory process that is European Union, because I'm not directly engaged in that process, and ECAC is beyond that process. But I assume that the provision was especially to avoid that. Obviously, if there is a SAF obligation in the European Union, that means that the fuel will be more expensive in the European Union than abroad. So it's a provision to avoid that. Even if today tankering is not a big common practice, but it could become in the future as a result of that price increase. So my only comment is that at least the principle of that provision was to avoid that risk. What I cannot give you an answer, because I understand your concerns, in which is the current status of that discussion. Definitely this is not for me to give an answer, but I think we all note your concern. And definitely there are the forum, the different fora currently in the European Union where this is still under discussion. And the voice of the airlines through IATA especially are obviously being heard in that process, hopefully with addressing your concerns. Thank you.
What we can add from the Civil Aviation Authority point of view is that we follow the discussions, so we are in the group, and our concerns are also the operators' concerns. And as Cesar said, and I couldn't agree more, that's exactly what I was going to say. The main worries and the main concerns were that we had to avoid competition distortions from third country operators and in general operators that would be tankering in the sense that SAF would be more expensive, at least in the beginning, than normal jet fuel. But what is interesting is that I will not comment, of course, on the text because it's on a current basis. It's still being discussed, and there are no closed draftings or solutions. But it is very interesting, and this kind of dialogue together with the operators, it is very useful for us because we can propose actually the drafting that would encounter your worries if possible. At least to have some flexibility, because there are, of course, worries that you have that are absolutely legitimate, because alternates have a different distance, like you said. There are objective and non-distortionary reasons for tankering, and that has to be, of course, ensured. But then there's a thin line between that and competition distortions, and the best solution, and the devil is in the details, will be found if we talk to everyone involved. And that's what I would like to say for this moment. I don't know if you would like this.
Thank you. Just to comment on this particular topic, yes, we have been following the discussions. And as Ms. Tânia Cardoso Simões said, it is very important to have your views, because you know the operations, you're the operator, you know how to deal with your market and your constraints. Just to reassure you that when these items were being discussed and launched, as I mentioned to you in the morning session, in the coffee break, we raised these questions to airports, to air operators, asking what are the main issues, the main constraints that you find in this drafting. And we incorporated some of them, or most of them, when asked for our technical advice, because it is important to have the views of the system and the views of the stakeholders. So, commenting on Mrs. Tânia Cardoso Simões, it is very important to have your views, and since this is an ongoing discussion, please feel free to share your concerns with us, and we will follow them through with the discussions. So thank you. Are there any more questions? Anyone online? Nobody online? Very good. So, Blandine, I think that there was some idea to have some highlights on the ICAO tools, the use of IT from your side. I think that would be most welcome from our participants in order to help us all find our way through the tools that ICAO has provided. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm sharing my screen again, if you can, please. I think for this presentation, I would like to show you the website, because as mentioned, most of the tools, they are available on the ICAO public website. So when you go to iq.int and you go to the main page of IQ, you click on environment and on one of the strategic objective, environment, then you reach the environment web page where we have, as I mentioned, all the activities and action under developed by IQ that are listed there. And we have the tools. So when you click on this tool web page, you see some of the tools that we developed to support our state. Some of these tools are available here. Some of these tools are available on the APER website, which is a dedicated website for the State Action Plan focal point. But I will go through that using this website. So first we have the IQ Carbon Emission Calculator. This is a tool that has been developed first at the beginning for the general public to understand how much CO2 emission your flight was generating. We developed this tool with the airlines, and NGOs, and this back in 2008. And since then, we have a working group in Cape that is in charge of updating this tool. The idea is to have a transparent methodology, so you can have access to the methodology here, and organization can develop their own action, their own carbon emission calculator using this methodology and just using their own number. So this is the tool with the interface for the general public. And on the APER website, which is a dedicated website for the focal point, you have an interface specifically for the state that allows them to do this calculation in a more, at a plane level, not at a seat level. I'm not going to talk about this tool in too much detail. This is, so I'm not talking at all about it. It's a tool when you want to develop you want to organize a meeting, such as IQ Assembly, for example, and you want to find what is the optimal location for your meeting in terms of CO2 emission. Then you enter the origin of all your participants, and this tool will tell you where is the best location to have this meeting. So maybe you can play with this tool one day with the assembly or with other international event. It's interesting. It's interesting to play with this tool.
Does it take into account alternative means of transport or only aviation?
Aviation.
It assumes that everybody is flying.
Well, yeah, it does. Well, if you come, we organized the assembly in Montreal, so we knew it was, everybody's going to fly to Montreal, most of them, yeah. So that's why, yes, indeed. But you can play with this tool and find what would be the best location. This is another tool, and I want to mention this one in more detail. This one is IFSET. IFSET is a tool that we developed to estimate the benefits, and when I talk about benefits, it's CO2 emission reduction, when you implement new operational measure. So you have access to this tool. It's a web-based tool. So for example, I don't want to show that. I'm not going into detail there. So you want to reduce the time of taxi, or you want to implement a CDO or a CCO, for example. I'm talking here about, sorry, maybe I should explain this. So you want to have a different profile for your descent or your climb. I'm sorry, maybe I should ask the airlines to define this kind of measures and to have a more efficient route. So if you want to implement this kind of mitigation measure and you want to know how much CO2 emission reduction you will gain from the implementation of this measure, so a more direct route, instead of doing some levels, you just do something more direct. So these kind of operational measures, you can estimate the benefits in terms of CO2 emission reduction using this tool. So in the case of when you develop your action plan and you don't have this information from your operator because maybe communication is not as great as the one that you have with TAP, you can estimate how much reduction will be generated with the implementation of operational measure. So this tool gives you estimation for a reduced taxi time, for CCO and CDO, as I said, for what else do we have as well? Single engine taxi, I think we have. So all these measures, operational measures, are computed in this tool, and you can generate emission reduction. You can understand what kind of emission reduction you will get from this mitigation measure tool is available here, and you have a guide, user guide available here. So very, very useful. Another tool, but this one is only for the state focal point. It's available on the APEA website. It's EBT. EBT has been developed to support the state when they develop the state action plan. And it's a tool that allows you to estimate the benefits in terms of CO2 emission reduction for all the measures that are listed on the ICAO guidance. So you can use EBT, as I said, if you use single-engine taxi, if you have a weight reduction in your airlines, if you have more direct route, if you have all those mitigation measures, I don't know which one we can have, the use of alternative fuel, the use of, all these measures are included, computed in the EBT, and you can estimate for each of the measures the CO2 emission reduction. So this is a tool, when you talk with your stakeholder, it can be useful to have this tool because you will need some input from the stakeholder to include in the tool. And that helps you to automatically estimate the benefits for the national mitigation measure. And once you are the focal point, you have access to the APEA website, you can share this tool with your stakeholder. We developed another tool available as well on the APEA website, and this is a tool that has been developed to support the state when they have to select mitigation measure to find what would be the most cost-efficient measure to implement. So we have computed and selected 20 mitigation measures that were the one that were the most used by the state. And then with a minimum input from your state to customize the tool and to reflect what's happening in your state, you can, this tool can help you to assess and to, to identify which measure and how much this measure would cost in your country to be implemented. I have mentioned this morning the ICAO e-learning course on UNITAR, on the UNITAR platform. So UNITAR is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. We have developed a training course on state action plan with them. One module is available to everybody. The rest is restricted for the focal point. So if you're interested, then you can get access to this course that is available to all here. We have as well an Eco Airport Toolkit e-collection. So this is contains guidance that are on different subjects. We have sustainable aviation fuel. We have renewable energy at airport. So this is also interesting guidance and tool to have a look at, available on the website as well. And the last tool I want to highlight, we talked about it during this CORSIA presentation, is the CERT. So this is one of the implementation elements of CORSIA and is updated every year to reflect the situation in terms of international aviation. And we have this tool, and it has been developed to support the aeroplane operator with the monitoring and reporting, and as we mentioned before as well, to support the state when they are doing the review of the emission report. So these are the tools that I wanted to highlight. They are available or on this website or on the APEA website. And I think I will stop here. Thank you.
We were talking about the timeline?
Oh, sorry. Yes, let's go back to
this morning.
timeline. We are this morning.
Yes, timeline and actions for
yes,
2023.
I'm just trying to get my presentation again. I think I have it here.
It's exactly the
yes,
same.
Exactly.
Morning,
Exactly. And to go back to the timeline on CORSIA. So this is a presentation. Okay, sorry. Excuse me. I'm not trying the right. Excuse me. Let me share again. Oh, up to you. Otherwise, I just share it now. You see it? Yes, you do. Excellent. Thank you. So this is the timeline that we have presented this morning, and this is just to remind everybody about the upcoming deadlines for CORSIA. for the year 2022. So we have the upcoming deadline of the 2021 CO2 emission data to be submitted by the state to ICAO using the CCR. CCR is also another tool that I did not present today, but it's only for the CORSIA focal point. We have ICAO that's going to publish the 2021 CO2 emission globally and the 2021 sector growth factor to, so the state can estimate the amount of offsetting requirement for the operator. By 30 November 2022, the state will submit to ICAO the list of operator attributed to their state, as well as a list of verification body accredited in their state. And by the end of December, ICAO will publish this list of operator and verification body, so airline operator can select a verification body in this list if they wish so. I think that's the main timeline I wanted to highlight. Thank you. You want to add something?
Are there any questions?
No? So.
Well, it seems everybody's tired. I am just going to say thank you in português. Portanto, queria agradecer a todos os que estiveram. Agradecia que passassem a palavra porque queríamos efetivamente que estivessem todos os operadores mais capacitados e com mais conhecimentos, e parece-nos que isto é de facto uma importante ferramenta agora que vai estar gravada online. Queria agradecer muito a quem nos apoiou, à Sandra, à Bárbara e a todos os que estão presentes, e no final agradecer muitíssimo à Blondine, thank you Blondine, e agradecer ao César também, porque acho que foi muito útil da minha parte, e falo só pessoalmente para já, foi extremamente útil e aprendi muitíssimo. Muito obrigada. A doutora Ana Vera da Mata vai fazer os closing remarks para fazer aqui um wrap-up como deve ser.
A pressão é muita. So, in English, just to make some closing remarks, I think that the second part of this workshop was incredibly fruitful, and we have discussed important topics to achieve this long-term aspirational goal for aviation. We have talked about the CORSIA compliance cycle. We have talked about the role of the verifiers and accredited bodies. We have discussed challenging topics as the EU ETS proposal and their compliance with CORSIA. There are still many challenges ahead, but we are sure that the way forward is to have these discussions, as Ms. Tânia Cardoso Simões just mentioned. The way forward is to have all the stakeholders in the aviation value chain, but also all other organizations that are impacted by this enormous challenge that is to have a vision for environmental sustainability for aviation. A final word for our speakers on the afternoon panel. Eduardo Santos from the Portuguese Environmental Agency that had a difficult task to comment on the challenges of CORSIA and EU ETS. And finally, last but definitely not least, a final word to Ms. Blandine Ferrier and Mr. César Velarde, who made tremendous, clear presentations, and I think help us all to better understand the challenges ahead and to better understand that these challenges impact every single one of us in the operations, in their worthiness, in all of our organization. This is a global challenge that we all must address. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.